So, good evening, everybody. You're very welcome here to Social Rights Ireland and the Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum, where we have a weekly Zoom meeting and often invite key speakers to come and talk to us. And it's a conversation, really. So, we've been very lucky this week to have the good company of Cork man, Tadgh Hickey, but we won't hold the Corkness against him because he's
Here
based
we
in
go.
Rome tonight. So he's maybe they're teaching him a few good jokes or something up there. I'm not sure, Tadgh, but your career will come on tenfold now that you've spent a bit of time amongst the good people amongst the bushes. But anyway, all joking aside, thank you very much, Tadgh, for coming here tonight and for giving up your time. You're in good company too, Tadgh, because our comrades from the Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum are here, and Tommy McCartney, his camera's off at the minute, but another good Tyrone man as well. So you're welcome here. Everyone is welcome. And I'm going to maybe start by introducing the title of tonight's programme, which is Victory to Iran. And it's a pro-resistance statement that we have never shied away from. And Tadgh, you have never shied away from coming out and supporting Palestine ever. And we commented this time last year when you were on the programme before how unusual that was. And we were asking where are all of the other high profile celebrities, show business, actors, the people who are in mainstream media, where are they? And it's sad to say, Tadgh, that there are even fewer people
Mm.
who would have as high a profile as you who are able to say victory to Iran without hesitation. So that's why it's important to have you on tonight because we have no problem. Our banner very coherently says victory to Iran. We stand with Iran and Iran is winning. So it would be good to hear from you, even about your own experiences of being in Iran, wherever you feel like talking or wherever this goes. We're easy with that. Thanks, Tadgh.
Thanks, Roisin, for such a lovely introduction. And I have a chaotic old head, so I'm not sure where I'll go, but I'll touch on a few things that I had in mind anyway, I suppose, on the topic of Iran. And I love the fact that you guys are unequivocal because it really feels to me that we're in a moment in history right now where you are either for or against the Iranian axis of resistance, or you're for the Epstein class. And I know it's something that Professor Morandi, who you recently had on, fucking hell, like no pressure following Professor Morandi. Wow. Um, but I know it's something that he made very clear, and other Iranian analysts made very clear early on, that this is an existential fight that we're in. I don't think most people I've spoke to in Iran, and I'm lucky enough to have several friends from Iran at this point. Also, if you hear carnage in the kitchen, both my kids are still awake and they're just still settling into Tyrone. Like I'm well acclimatized, but they're still kind of managing the six counties. But I think he was very clear to kind of to make it very clear to people in the West, particularly, that you've got a choice. You either support the people who are resisting against this horrific regimes, I would say, in Washington and Tel Aviv, that are just making it crystal clear that they won't be reined in by politeness. They won't be reined in by democracy. Like in the case of Israel, the people who want to try to defeat Israel or to come to some sort of diplomatic settlement with Israel, I feel like the Israelis laugh at those people. The only reason that they haven't taken southern Lebanon, for instance, which they've kind of on and off been trying to take since the late 60s, is because the Lebanese resistance fought them out of southern Lebanon each and every time. The only reason that they haven't already balkanized and destroyed Iran is because Iran has always fought back. It has always kept its head high in spite of the horrific economic sanctions, which, having been to Iran, target ordinary people. Of course they do. And like the Americans are very clear about that. This is what it's supposed to do. They know that it's not going to affect the leaders of Iran. I mean, sometimes in the kind of shtick that you get this with the Palestinian resistance as well. The leaders of the resistance, or the leaders of the IRGC, or the mullahs, as they call them, are all like billionaires, and then the ordinary people are suffering. If that's the case, then your economic sanctions are not going to hurt the people at the top. They're going to hurt ordinary people. I've met people in Iran. I have Iranian friends who haven't been able to access vital medicine that they need. They are being left to die on and off for the last 4 decades because of these economic sanctions. And yet Iran has still managed to find a way to fight back. The only time manners is put on Israel, the only real pressure that's put on Israel, with the exception of definitely a wonderful global BDS movement, and we've all tried to play our part. Many people on this call tonight have done far more than I've ever done. We've all tried to play our part, but I think there has to be more respect given to the actual people putting their bodies on the line to fight back against this depraved regime of endless violence. And me, like you guys, I have no issue whatsoever with saying that I absolutely stand with Iran and victory to Iran under all circumstances in their, in my opinion, very noble fight to fight back against these two regimes that have all the resources in the world. They have enjoyed all the impunity in the world. I've said in my little stupid show that I've been doing recently, it's an online kind of chat show where I'm trying to add a little bit of levity, but also trying to get to the point of what's going on in the world right now. I think we should collectively take a moment to celebrate what Iran, the Palestinian resistance, and Hezbollah have achieved in the last period. They are taking on still a regime that was so arrogant. In the case of Trump announced that there was going to be nothing but complete and utter hands in the air, we're done, please just take our resources. The regime collapse, I think, is probably what the US was aiming for. Regime change, I think, is what the US was aiming for, and regime collapse, I think, is what the Israelis were looking for. Well, in the case of the Israelis, at the start of the war, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we had about 90 to 92% approval rating in the Israeli public, which I just think tells you everything you need to know about the thinking of that society, that they have created this level of murder and mayhem over the last 2.5 years. They have left millions of Palestinians homeless, millions of Lebanese, millions of Iranians, and they still have that thirst for war. That, for me, is a society that is beyond reform. I don't know what you do with that society. And I know some scholars are talking lately about the idea of, there's a prominent Israeli scholar who is Bartov, I think is his name. I was reading recently that his new book is about trying to divorce Zionism from Israel. So he believes that Israel can be saved, but Zionism has somehow become toxic. And I was just rereading Ilan Pappé's book about the ethnic cleansing of Palestine recently. Like, Zionism is Israel. Like, those two things are the exact same. How could you possibly divorce one from the other? Israel is the logical conclusion of the violence, the murder, the mayhem, the dehumanization that Zionism promised. You get people in the kind of liberal Zionist class these days trying to convince us that, really Zionism is just the Jewish right or the Jewish quest to have a homeland. But that's fine. Like, if they could have found an island somewhere where there genuinely was no people, I don't know about you guys, but I would have been like, yeah, great. Like, you go and you can have your ethno-supremacist land there, and that's totally fine. The big problem then and the big problem now is you've got all these Palestinians in the land. So you have to either kill all of them or you've got to ethnically cleanse all of them. And an Iranian friend said to me recently, I thought it was so profound. She said, what the Iranians have done wrong is the same thing of what the Palestinians have done wrong, arguably what the Syrians have done wrong, what the Yemeni people have done wrong. We're just in the way. We're just in this region where the powers that be, the global hegemons in terms of Israel and the US, we want that land. Like, we want to have supremacy over that land, and they're not even hiding it anymore, guys. I actually don't really understand how people are still shirking from the idea of supporting the only people literally fighting back. Like, we're all fighting back creatively and in different ways, and we're marching and we're organizing and we're creating direct actions, and some of it has been successful. Let's acknowledge that. but the people actually fighting back against this depravity, to not support them when all sides of the houses, the US ambassador to Israel, Huckabee, during a conversation with Tucker Carlson, described the Greater Israel plan as that would be fine. For Israel to take all the land in the region, that would be fine. And for then you get this kind of conception as well of it's just a Netanyahu problem. And yet the leader of the opposition supports the Greater Israel plan as well. So like they are screaming at us that if they're not curtailed by military action, if they're not curtailed by Hezbollah and Iran, they will continue doing whatever it is they want to do. And people who know a lot more about this than I do have said that this is their last stand. I mean, Netanyahu, like going back decades, as everyone in this call knows, this was his wet dream, like to go to war with Iran, to find an American president, gormless enough, I think. And also, okay, like we all understand the man is compromised to some degree. Okay, like I think it would be idiotic to say that he's not at all compromised, but I don't think that's the full story. I think with Trump, he found somebody that he can manipulate because of Trump's ego. Trump was so pliable because Netanyahu and the lobby were kind of saying to him, look, we've never had a president with the balls to do it. You know, the mullahs have been getting away with this, that, and the other. Nobody can quite define what it is they've been getting away with. What they've been getting away with actually is they've been fighting back against Israel. They've had the audacity to fight back against Israel and say, actually, Zionism is poisonous. It has wrecked this whole region. And we've had constant war since the inception of Israel, which are all kind of facts. And I think Trump was sold on the idea, I'll get in, I'll do it quickly. It'll be Venezuela plus. I'll sort out Iran. And you'll never again have that moment where you have such a pliable president with such a lack of really in-depth understanding. Like I'm a comedian from Cork and I kind of understood you're not going to get in and out in Iran. Like it's not structured in that way. Like power is kind of placed in multiple regions in Iran. And also then the fact that it's a really mountainous country, geography is on its side. It has spent the last number of decades, certainly since the Iraq War, preparing for this moment as well. And that was very clear when I was even there. They don't want war. They don't initiate war. They don't have any history whatsoever of starting wars. And we're supposed to believe that this is the greatest sponsor of terrorism in the world. I mean, I don't need to tell anybody on this call that I think a lot of the world is waking up now and seeing that the greatest sponsors, perpetuators of terrorism the world has ever seen is the US, and Israel obviously is its kind of lackey. And we wonder sometimes who's wagging who there. But that axis is the one that has created all this violence and horror and hell. And I think to get to a positive note, I stand back personally and I applaud what Iran has done, because I'm speaking to Iranians. Some would have been pro-regime, and we might get into the regime-itis in a second. Some who would have been somewhere in the middle. They have issues with the government of Iran, absolutely. I've even spoken to one or two people, maybe indirectly, who would have big problems. All of them agree that they're kind of slightly surprised at just how well Iran has fought back, that it has created all these new leverage points, obviously the Strait of Hormuz being a big one, but that they've literally taken the worst that Israel and the US can throw at them kind of like twice in the last year. They're still standing. All that the US, as far as I understand from the people that I'm talking there, has achieved, again, through its own brutality, which I'll never understand. It's the one thing that will always bring lefties and anti-imperialists together. We will argue with each other till the end of time, but the violence and atrocities of empire, I think, will always bring us back together. And that has certainly happened in Iran, where I can't believe that, like, if you park the morality for a moment, I can't get my head round the stupidity, the tactical, strategic error of destroying heritage sites in Iran, of using experimental state-sponsored, state-sanctioned terrorism to murder school children in Manab. Like, what did they think was going to be the response of the ordinary Iranian to doing that? It has only served to strengthen the resolve, I think, within Iran. There's a complete rallying around the flag effect. but I mean, people who even believed in the government's ability to fight back are actually surprised at just how much Iran has the global economy by the balls. The Strait of Hormuz has emerged, I think, as an issue where they didn't even understand themselves, I don't think, what a card this is. Like, this is by far a much more important card than the nuclear card will ever be. And this is not me saying this, it's just the people I'm talking to there, because the nuclear card is kind of hard to use. You know what I mean? Like, it's a good deterrent to have on the table, but the Strait of Hormuz is something that they can turn on and off. And they know that this particular president in the US has gotten to the point where, you know, his big selling point isn't going to keep prices down. I'm going to look after the ordinary American worker. And now the base is really saying, well, this guy's just full of shit, really. He's making billions from his presidency. America's getting poorer, prices are going higher, and Iran holds all the cards. And I just want to, before I shut up, I just want to touch on the regime-itis. I just really hope that, I hoped after Gaza, after the Gaza Holocaust, and we see just how clearly the mainstream media lies. And I don't want to, you know, end on a kind of a Russell Brand note here, like, but the mainstream media just does lying for empire. Like, that's what it does. Look at the way in which the BBCs and the CNNs of the world created the conditions for the dehumanization of Palestinians so that Israel could continue slaughtering them. I just felt that after that, we would all just look maybe a second or third time at the supposed facts and realities that we're getting from the mainstream media on any topic whatsoever, but particularly Muslims, particularly countries in that region. Then we had the case in January of the so-called massacre of Iranian protesters, which started off, I think, in a Time magazine article. There's again, people on this call probably know this already, but if you don't, there's a grey zone article that basically debunks the 30,000 murdered Iranian protesters story. And actually, it's fascinating where it comes from. It starts off, I think, from a blogger who used to be exclusively writing about food until about a year ago, and again, somehow ends up writing this article that gets into The Guardian. It sounded suspiciously like somebody who's part of Israeli intelligence somehow finding their way into co-writing a New York Times article about widespread systematic sexual violence committed by Hamas. You've got all these weird loopholes for empire when it comes to atrocity propaganda. But again, in the Time magazine article about that, they actually state 3 other figures other than the 30,000. And then the paragraph ends, and people can go and check this up. The paragraph ends, but we really don't know. We don't know how many people were killed because it's really hard to get information out there. So you're saying it's 30,000. It could also be 25,000 or it could be 40,000. But ultimately, you don't know because we can't get any information out there. Like, I remember reading that and thinking, like, as a satirist, I have nothing to add there. You're saying all these people have been killed, but you're also saying we can't get any information out of the country. And that became widespread figure, like, everywhere, until Trump started losing the war that he said he was going to win after a day. He was going to annihilate them, but suddenly he was reminding people, I think he described them as animals. And again, remember, Trump is the guy who's telling us now, his administration is telling us we need to tone down the rhetoric. This is from the guy who said he was going to end a civilization there recently on Truth Social. But I don't know if you noticed, at one point Trump announced that it was 40,000 was killed in January. Later on, as he was becoming more frustrated, that number went up to 45,000. The official line from the American regime now is that 45,000 Iranians were killed in January. And I was talking to a friend from Iran recently, and she said, where are the funerals? Where are the funerals? Like, she couldn't get her head around the fact that, you know, there's been open warfare, carpet bombing of Iranian cities now for 50 days. And there's been about 2,000 or 3,000 people killed. Anyone being killed is awful. But the people who are bringing you the 30,000, maybe 40,000, possibly 45,000 figure, they don't give a shit about Iranian lives. And I just think that the next time one of us gets lured into the idea that Iran is a regime and it mistreats its people, just be careful where that information is coming from. If it's brought to you by the people who dehumanized Palestinians to the point where they were slaughtered and you were no longer supposed to care about it or even feel anything, if they were brought to you by the people who manufactured an amount of people who've been murdered in Iran earlier in the year so that the US could go to war against them, be very skeptical. And the last thing I'd say on that is, has Iran mistreated its own people? I would say definitely yes. Has Iran got elements to it that are repressive? I would say definitely yes. But again, to look at those things without the context of this country being the last bulwark against US imperialism in that region, one of the last in the world really that has fought back, they have done everything they can to undermine that country since its inception, since the inception of the Islamic Republic. I'll give you one example. When I was in Tehran visiting, I did an interview with Press TV, and everywhere I went, people were talking quietly amongst themselves going, this place is crawling with Mossad. And at the time, like, I'm just some fucking idiot from Cork. I'm like, that sounds kind of mad. That can't really, is that true? I don't know. Are they? It also sounded something I was kind of going like, could I spot one? Like, could I end up with an interaction from Mossad here? I'm in the studio doing an interview with Press TV, and the presenter, who I won't name, we went to an ad break. When I was sitting down, it was actually the occasion of President Raisi had been killed in that helicopter crash. And I was just like, I was in Iran, and they were asking me questions about it, like ludicrous. I'm never on RT, like, and here I am on mainstream Iranian television. And we went to the ad break, and I said, like, what's this? Because I was getting on well with Jaman. I said, what's the story with Mossad? Like, people say there's Mossad, there's a lot of Mossad here or whatever. Like, how do you deal with that or whatever? And he just leaned into me and he said, oh, Mossad are in this building. So, like, Israeli intelligence are everywhere. Netanyahu has been wanting to destroy this country for his whole career. The Americans have been telling us that Iran is the most evil country the world has ever seen, maybe with the exception of the Russians, for as long as I'm alive, and I suppose many of you guys as well. I can understand how a repressive nature has fed into the way in which that government operates. I don't condone it. I don't know enough about it to speculate. But one thing I know for sure is that as much as I despise the Irish government and everything it stands for, as much as Micheál Martin is my least favorite person of all time, including fictional people, I wouldn't want the US and Israel to dictate to me how I would change that government. I would never welcome bombs in the air slaughtering Irish school children so that I could have regime change. I also feel like I live in a country that can be quite repressive, that can shut down criticism of the government, that can isolate people. I've experienced all these things myself. But would I welcome death and destruction and experimental state-sanctioned terrorism from the air, from the Israelis and the Americans? Never. And that, guys, is the feeling of most Iranians. We hear an awful lot from the monarchists because they're loud, they're wealthy, they control a lot of the Iranian satellite channels, which are effectively Zionist PSYOP channels, really. But we don't hear an awful lot from the ordinary Iranians. And the reason for that is because we are not supposed to. Like, I did a little sketch recently where, you know, apparently RT and BBC and CNN were unable to find any Iranian at all. Like, they couldn't find anyone. This is a country of like 92 million people just in the country itself. They couldn't find anyone who wasn't delighted about their country being bombed. Like, how stupid do they think we are? Why? How many Irish people do you think would welcome bombs from the air to destroy our heritage sites, to destroy everything that we value as Irish people because we want to change the government? Instead, I think CNN, Jake Tapper, one day had, what's her name? Emily Schrader, like, who is a paid up member of Israeli intelligence. She's bragging about it on Twitter, and they had her on a segment of what happens next in Iran. So I think we have to continue calling this stuff out. We have to look at this as a moment where I think we need to fall in behind Iran. They're achieving extraordinary things, and they need the support of anti-imperialists and pro-humanity and anti-billionaire class Epstein filth. They need all of us in behind them right now, because I think Zionism is really on its knees. Global support has never been so low. The polls in America are so encouraging. This is Zionism's last stand, and it's losing. Like, it's clearly losing. They didn't want to go to the negotiation table. They didn't want a ceasefire with Hezbollah. They were told they had to have it. They didn't want the war to stop. They want endless war, particularly Netanyahu. If the war stops, his career stops and he probably goes to prison. So they're being coaxed into all sorts of things that they don't want. And now is not the time to rest on our laurels. A lot of us on the pro-Palestine scene are exhausted. we somehow thought we were going to get massive change in 2.5 years. We probably should have talked to Palestinians a little bit more about that. It takes time. But now I think it's time to re-strategize and to fall in behind what Iran is achieving, because Iran, for me, is the center point of resistance. And I feel like Zionism is falling. And when it falls, Iran is one of the very few countries on earth, I think, that can hold its head up high and said, well, we did absolutely everything we could and we paid for it with our blood. Not some social media cancellations. They didn't get shadow banned or get their Instagram account taken down like I did. And I feel like I've had a bad run of it. Iran have paid for it with the brutalization of their civilian population, the decimation of their heritage sites, and they've come out stronger than ever. I think that's a lesson to all of us about what we can achieve when we actually take the fight to empire. So thank you so much for listening to me waffle, and I'll throw the floor open.
Not waffling at all, Tadgh. That was absolutely brilliant, excellent, and how you even tied it all together. No, not scripted, not rehearsed, and Wayne's in the background, fantastic. Thank you. Yeah. I know what it's like when you have the noise, the background noise, and you're trying to concentrate at the same time and sort of look normal. So yeah, you did a good job. Thank you. Covered so much, particularly about mainstream media and the frustrations that we have had here for weeks and weeks of how come people can understand that mainstream media lies about Palestine, but they can't apply the same logic to Iran. Although, and that's why our job's very important. And Tadgh, that's why you are cancelled on Instagram. Yes, I know we are not going to make false equivalences and go anywhere close to comparing, how we're, silenced, isolated, attacked, vilified, all the rest here. It's not comparable, but it is testament to the fact that you're making a difference. And imagine to think that telling the truth is such a threat to the
Yeah.
empire. The truth, just saying the truth how it is without apology. And without this both sidism as well, trying to get balance. It's very liberal kind of
Yeah.
Western way of doing things, starting with the apology first. But like it's so refreshing, Tadgh, and you're not, can I just say, you're not just a wee comedian from Cork. You're a very important asset to the whole movement. And I would also like to acknowledge, Tadgh, that during the fuel protests, we watched and we shared a video that you did as well about looking at, the anti-imperial, you do make a distinction between, anti-imperialists and lefties.
Yeah.
I think that's an important distinction as well, that this left-right dichotomy does not serve the working class at all well. And it was good to hear you come out in support of the protests against the government, against the rise in
Yeah.
cost of living effectively. And that does not mean, and again there's another there are quite a few lefties or virtue signalers who are very quick to accuse us of supporting agitators on the right, so I mean, we're very clear about that, and so were you. I thought it was a great video that you did, and you were able to join the dots as well as, yes, the BDS movement is important globally, but here at home, there are things that we can do more than boycott, divest, sanction, more than, boycott Coca-Cola or McDonald's, that actually we need to be more active as a class against the, as you say, what Miranda, I think, might have coined it. It's a great phrase, isn't it? The Epstein network, like.
Yeah. It's
And,
brilliant.
they've always existed. The ruling class exist, and they've always been depraved. They've always been rotten to the
Yes.
core and barbaric. But I suppose that we've never, maybe have we ever lived in a time where we are seeing the ruling class so exposed through the Epstein files? And that is the advantage, perhaps, of the phrase, which Tommy mightn't agree necessarily with the phrase Epstein class, but you understand, you would use the term, and we would use socialist, the ruling class. But right now, who are the ruling class? And for many people who aren't, who are only starting to engage in class consciousness because we've been so distracted by identity politics, are starting to wake up, like you said, to the idea of we are working class. Like Dr. Ranjit Brar said it the other day here on another video. He said, "I am a doctor." And he's a very high up doctor. He's a heart surgeon. He says, but I am part of the working class. I am not. I do not own any part of the means of production. So,
Yes.
to have that awareness and for you to have the influence that you have, yeah, yes, you're a great comedian, Tadgh, but you are a very important activist. So you're very welcome here. I would like to open it to the floor, but before we do, I'll maybe invite comrade Tommy McCartney, who's also a Tyrone man, to not comment on Tadgh being amongst the bushes tonight, just on what he said. Tommy, what did you think of Tadgh tonight?
I thought it was fabulous, to be honest, and very frank and discerning and getting into the nitty-gritty of the situation, telling us why Iran is able to stand and to dispense with this nonsense about 45,000 protesters having been slaughtered. The fact is that there's been a lot of actually in the early days a lot of police shot, and you have to ask the question who by. And of course, there's a lot of fifth columnists working in Iran. But yes, an excellent piece, and is, I think, very encouraging way Tadgh has pointed to the fact that Iran is holding its ground, 90 odd million people, mountainous terrain. The Yanks might be able to put boots on the ground along the beaches, but they'll not get to the heart of Iran without suffering casualties. But yes, I think you've done an excellent presentation, Tadgh. Congratulations. So, did he say that he's in Tyrone tonight?
He is, yeah, I think so. Like, sorry, it's out now. You're going to have the whole of Cookstown, Dungannon, and Omagh swarming you. Oh, it looks like you're in the countryside. You're hidden. You're hidden
Yeah.
away.
Plenty of cows.
And a good smell too, Tadgh.
Welcome home. Welcome home.
Margaret.
Tadgh, just on that point, thank you very much, Tommy. Great to see you tonight, and Patricia Campbell as well from the Pader O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum, our great comrades. But on the point, would you like to come in maybe we're diverging off topic, but I don't think it is, to talk about the recent fuel protests and even, the importance of building momentum at home against this regime that we have, this neoliberal regime that does not serve any of us here sitting in this room tonight any value, any purpose. It's so exploitative, and I think we often ignore the slow violence of capitalism, actually, which is the root cause of all of the evils that we are seeing. But we never, I love your language, we never talk about the regime here at home.
Yeah.
We brought it in. Like, look at the language we use, dictators everywhere, out there, and the regime out there. But what about the regime at home?
Yeah. Quick thing on the fuel protest. All right, like I had one or two, not many actually, to be honest, but I had one or two people saying, "Oh, you're endorsing racists and far right and stuff." I suppose my general helicopter view of the whole thing is that if we're part of a movement, in my understanding of what I've read and little bits and pieces of activism that I have been involved in, if your movement isn't growing, or if it's not progressing, if it's not moving somewhere, then it kind of fails to do the thing it's supposed to do. Its raison d'etre is to move, like, and to grow. So if you're going to constantly kind of cancel things and say, well, this is racist or this is far right or whatever, and you're kind of purifying what it is your thing is, then you're definitely not a movement at all then, or it's an exclusionary movement. Like, it's a big problem in the pro-Palestine community. Like, I've talked about this before. Like, I find it baffling that somebody like George Galloway, for instance, is like cancelled by the officialdom of the pro-Palestine scene in Britain. He no longer is invited to speak at any of the events. Loki is the same. I mean, Loki is probably the most influential artist, I would say, in the pro-Palestine community in Britain, has brought so many young people in to the movement and has educated them about Palestine. And the two of them, I think for different reasons, are cancelled. In the case of George Galloway, some of his views on gender are objectionable to people within the community. But again, there, I would say that is, in a way, is a kind of a distraction, because either we're talking about Palestine or we're not. And if we're trying to grow the movement and we're saying he can't be part of it, she can't be part of it because of their views on other issues, then what you get, I think, is the thing is kind of contracting, which is then the exact opposite of a growing movement that's going to agitate for change and directly challenge the ruling class. So, like, there's probably some of the methodology of the fuel protests I wasn't like enamored with. There was probably some people involved that I would find a lot of their views like more than objectionable, to be honest. But to jump straight in and say racist, far right, whatever, that to me is part of a culture of, you know, purification. And I'm a perfect kind of entity over here, and this is an imperfect one. And there's nothing progressive about that, actually. I don't think there's nothing. I think, like, we're trying to bring as many people in as possible. And I like you said, Roisin, I think you're bang on. The billionaire class has never been this exposed. The whole point of the Epstein class is that they protect each other. Those emails were never supposed to come out. It was like a kind of a depraved Ponzi scheme. Everyone's involved in it and everyone supports each other. I can't shit on this guy because then he's going to shit on me, and suddenly the whole lot of us are going to be exposed. I would say the real powers that be have never been so isolated and exposed. And we have a real opportunity now to see what unites us much more than divides us as a kind of unified working class. And that's why I was saying, for those protests, you achieved an awful lot in a few days. You got the government to their knees. You brought the country to an economic standstill. I don't know about you guys, but that's everything I was trying to do for the last 2.5 years. But the groups I was involved with, we had lovely moments. We had incredible solidarity. We had a lot of symbolic victories, but we never achieved that. So I think let's look at what the other side is kind of achieving, because two things. One, they're not the other side fundamentally. That's the big thing. That's the big reveal. They have the same issues, but I think maybe what might divide us is they're pointing at the foreigner. Some of them, not all of them, some of them are pointing at the foreigner as a problem, and we're all pointing at the government, the system of governance, imperialism generally, capitalism generally. So if we could join those dots and add those points rather than shitting on the thing that achieved, let's be honest, a lot of the goals that we would love to achieve, I think it just comes across as kind of, it's just really envious, like, and a little bit petty. So let's just stand back, you know. Because again, it just comes down to whether you're trying to grow a movement or you're trying to purify the movement that you're in. And the pro-Palestine movement is so guilty of that. Like, it's happening in Cork, it's happening everywhere. It's like, your views on this other issue that has fuck all to do with Palestine are objectionable to me, like, so you're kind of out. And I just don't know what that has got to do with the liberation of Palestine. It has nothing. It has nothing.
Yeah, I'm glad you said it, Tadgh, and you say it so well, so clearly. Yeah, that with the growing consciousness around class, that is changing. So I think we can't despair, and we must challenge it. It's hard sometimes when you're feeling very frustrated to not sometimes snap or bite back, or to be patient, but it's really important to be patient and give people space and time. Like, a revolution is not going to happen overnight. You know, there's not going to be some kind of win. As you say, Iran illustrates that perfectly. They have for 40 years been preparing for this moment in time. That is a long time. I don't know if it's a cultural thing, maybe the nature of our society, where it's like everything's convenient, everything's quick, we want it, you know, we measure goals very differently, like, and we like to see the success criteria, you know, that we can tick the box. But I think we're going to have to start readjusting our mindset around what endurance means, and what resilience actually means. It's good to see some people want to come in and ask questions. So, Tadgh, if you're able to stay on
Of course.
after,
Yeah.
great. We will end the recording now so that others can come in and speak perhaps more freely. So I'd like to formally close the discussion and by thanking Tadgh Hickey, our comrade in Cork, for joining us tonight and for giving us a very broad and a very frank conversation starter, hopefully, on why Iran is so important right now in this moment in time, and how by standing up to the Zionist entity, they are in fact the only country in the whole world that is making sure that the Zionist regime's impunity will end. So,
Yeah.
Tadgh, stay with us, and thank you very much to Tommy McKerney, to all of our comrades, to all of you who come week in, week out for joining us. Free Palestine, victory to Iran.
Free Palestine.